The Hill used to travel by night. It was September in 1961, and the weather was cool. They drove down the winding road through the White Mountains. Perhaps it was just a feeling, but Betty felt uneasy. Both were educated, rational people. Betty was a social worker, and Barney was on the board of the United States Commission on Civil Rights. Neither were easy to scare or overly superstitious. But Betty was filled with a deep discomfort. She felt as if she were being followed. That's because, according to Betty, they were. A large, strange light had been following them for miles. This light filled them with a deep sense of fear and dread. The light was pancake-shaped, with a double row of windows, standing inside of which Betty claimed she saw creatures human-like in shape. The two continued to drive, fearful of what could come. Just outside of Indian Head, New Hampshire, Barney pulled over the car. Slowly, both got out of the car. Barney held on to a set of binoculars that he usually kept in the glove compartment. Both of them watched the lights carefully, fear consuming them. As they watched, the light seemed to move closer. As the light grew nearer and nearer, the two panicked and attempted to get back into the car. The car began to vibrate, and their ears were filled with a deafening buzz, and that was the last either of them could remember. When the Hills came to, hours had disappeared into the late September sky. They felt confused and their limbs were heavy. As they looked around, they became acutely aware that they were somewhere else. Without explanation, the Hills had moved more than 35 miles from where they had last remembered. Neither of them could account for where the hours had gone, nor how they had appeared there. Barney started the car, and the two disappeared into the night, driving in silence. The Hills arrived home several hours later than they had expected. As they parked, they began to know that something was not quite right. Something was so terribly off. For one, both of their watches had stalled at the exact same time. For another, Betty's dress was dirty and had a rip in the skirt that neither of them could account for. Barney had been wearing his best shoes that he always kept in pristine, perfect condition. However, now the shoes were covered in deep scuffs. Barney's binoculars had a thick leather binding that was now ripped where it had previously been in perfect condition. This was the kind of damage that required some force to cause. The biggest thing, though, was that neither of them could account for that lost time. They had driven the same road many times before and were sure of exactly how long it took. However, this time, it had taken several extra hours. Neither of them could remember stopping at any extra places. So, where had the time gone? They felt shaken and somewhat disturbed. However, they both decided to put the event behind them. After all, neither of them had any idea if anything had actually happened to them. But Betty could not put the event behind her. She was haunted by vivid dreams filled with horrifying images. These dreams happened successively for 5 nights in a row. With each night, her ears were filled with that noise of that deafening hum. Then, the dream stopped, never to return. Barney was affected in other ways. A key thing that Barney noted was feeling dirty. He would shower often and for extremely long periods of time. Though he had no dreams, he noticed small metallic spots in their car that he had not previously seen. This discovery only further disturbed him. Barney inspected all of the items that had been in the car that night before he instructed Betty to leave all the items on the back porch for several days. This scared Betty, causing her to discard her dress. However, after her dreams had faded away, she retrieved the dress from the trash, hoping to find answers in the dark purple fabric. As she inspected the skirt, she noticed an unidentified pink powder. There were no answers for Betty, only more questions. On September the 21st, Betty called the Peace Air Force Base. She hoped to report what she had believed she had experienced. On the 26th, Betty filed an official report and wrote a full statement. Betty was then told an unsettling truth. On the night of their experience, something had appeared on the base's radar. As the weeks passed, Betty and Barney began to drive the same stretch of road where their experience was claimed to have happened. They hoped to find some sort of evidence that could put their minds at ease, something that could prove that they had not imagined the whole thing. However, nothing was to be found. Betty was desperate for some kind of answer, any kind of answer. The two suffered in silence about their experience until the next fall. In 1962, Betty and Barney Hill attended a meeting at their local church. That night, there was an Air Force captain scheduled to speak about a book he had written. Apparently, at one point, the subject of hypnosis came up, specifically hypnosis being used to recover suppressed memories. This caused Betty and Barney to approach Captain Ben Sweat afterwards. They both shared what they believed had happened to them last September, and it was suggested that they seek professional help. They decided to do exactly what had been suggested to them. They sought out professional help. Between January and June of 1964, the couple was hypnotized by their doctor, who hoped to find answers. Within these sessions, the couple began to remember events that had transpired. Betty and Barney had been driving when they encountered a roadblock. Then, the car was suddenly surrounded by creatures. These creatures, Betty explained, had large, blank eyes and gray skin. These creatures, which Betty identified to be males, removed the couple from their car and walked them through a small, wooded area, then up a ramp into the ship. When they entered the ship, the two were then separated so that separate exams could be performed on them. Betty was forced down a hallway and then into a room and onto a table. A new creature had entered the room, which Betty identified only as the Examiner. He spoke English, though it was flawed at times and hard to understand. He took samples from her skin, nails, mouth, ears, nose, and hands. A needle was thrust into Betty's navel, which caused her to scream out in pain. A lock of her hair was then cut off as well. Soon, the Examiner left, and he was replaced by a man called the Leader. Betty spoke to the Leader, asking a series of questions. One of these questions was of their place of origin, to which the Leader pointed to a map of stars. She was then told by the Leader that she could take a book home with her. However, later, as the Hills were escorted off of the ship, the book was taken away by another one of the creatures. In one of their sessions, Betty was asked to sketch the star map, which she did. This star map was later matched to be a fairly accurate drawing of Zeta Reticuli, an actual star system. After many sessions, their doctor determined that Betty and Barney were indeed disturbed by something and seemed to suffer severe anxiety about it. Word of the Hills had spread through some niche groups, and Dr. J. Allen Hynek, a chairman of the Department of Astronomy at Northwestern University, became intrigued. After conducting interviews in which Betty and Barney were under hypnosis, Hynek determined that there was no evidence of outright fabrication. Hynek also analyzed Betty's star map. Many looked at Betty's map and wondered how someone could draw something that was so similar. However, Carl Sagan attributed this to her drawing random dots that just so happened to look so similar.
Alleged star map. Here's what Betty Hill said it looked like. Now, why would anybody take this seriously? Because here is a real map, widely publicized by UFO enthusiasts, of 15 selected nearby stars, including the sun, as seen from one particular vantage point in space. This map includes stars that were first cataloged several years after Betty Hill recalled what she says she saw in the alien ship. Her map required, we are told, information that was not then available on the Earth. There is a resemblance between the two maps, but that's mainly because the lines corresponding to navigation routes have been copied from the Hill map onto the real star map. If we were to substitute some other set of lines for the Hill lines, we find that the eye suddenly is biased against seeing any agreement between the two maps at all. To make an objective test, however, let's remove the lines altogether. And then there's very little resemblance left.
In 1965, a story appeared on the front page of the Boston Traveler, titled "UFO Chiller, did they seize couple. Multiple other stories were published on the Hills, many of which framed the couple as either lunatics or as scammers. People wondered what they hoped to receive from their claims. Both were valued members of the community and were highly regarded. A claim like this could do nothing but diminish their credibility. Many others pointed out that an episode of The Outer Limits aired days before their hypnotic sessions. The episode, titled The Bolero Shield, shares many similarities to the Hill case. Before this episode aired, Barney claimed that he saw short men with thick black hair. After this episode, during his sessions, he claimed that the men were completely hairless. Another thing that was pointed out were the discrepancies between Betty and Barney's stories. According to Betty, the aliens spoke broken English. According to Barney, they communicated telepathically. To many, there are too many unexplained differences for the story to make any sense. However, for others, their claims read as a truth. Around this time, there were already many Americans who claimed to have seen ships in the sky, or even people who believed they had witnessed abductions. In 1969, Barney passed away from a cerebral hemorrhage. Betty and Barney were one of the first publicized abductions. Since then, thousands of people have come forward with claims of abductions and experimentation. In fact, many of these stories share key elements with the Hills story. The Hills have even inspired films such as Dark Skies, The Fourth Kind, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. A lot of what we use, including the way the ships look, the color of the alien skin, the abductions themselves, the lights, and even the trouble remembering what had happened, are all borrowed elements from this story. Now these elements are even considered par for the course in the genre. Despite what people say, Betty believed. Betty spent much of her life under close scrutiny by both the media and people who claimed that it simply could not be possible. Perhaps what Betty and Barney believed so adamantly were simply ramblings of a couple who fed each other's delusions. Or perhaps there was something more. What if we aren't alone? And what if what the Hills claimed to have happened to them was actually true? What does it say about anyone's safety? Many who claim to have been abducted in recent years claim that they were taken from their beds, such as Linda Napolitano. If all of their claims are true, then that reveals a much darker, much more unsettling truth. Though there are many skeptics in the Hill case, there seems to be more questions than answers, questions which we may never know the answer to. Or maybe we don't want to know the answer. Hi guys, thank you so much for watching. Remember to drop a comment down below for further discussion, or even if you just want to suggest some further cases for me to cover. Please like and subscribe to see more content such as this. If you want more information about this case, I will leave links for some interesting articles in the description box. Thank you guys and good night.